What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you the Week 16 Fantasy Football wide receiver rankings. As I talked about yesterday, congratulations to those of you that advanced in your playoffs. This is Week 16, the fantasy semifinals for most people in their leagues. If you were on a bye last week, welcome back. If you were not on a bye, congrats on surviving the hellhole that was Week 15 of fantasy football. You guys should know the drill by now. I'm going over my wide receiver rankings in this video, talking about their cornerback matchups, usage, etc., how they've been playing recently. And as always, if you guys enjoy this video, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you're interested in becoming a member of the channel, go hit the join button next to the subscribe button on our YouTube page. Without further ado, we're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. All right, so here is the matchup chart for Week 16. As you guys can see, the Cowboys wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Jones, Tyreek Hill, among the best wide receiver matchups this week, whereas, the Patriots wide receivers, Bills wide receivers, Buccaneers wide receivers, and Brandon Cooks have some of the harder matchups this week. If you guys want the full list of rankings, I'm only going to be digging into my top 24 in depth. I'll talk about my top 32 overall briefly, the wide receivers 25 to 32, but the rest of the rankings are available in the description if you guys are so inclined. It's totally free to do so. You can just click on that sheet there. They will be updated as frequently as possible. It'll say the last time that they were updated at the top of the sheet. So without further ado, let's get into the rankings. We have wide receiver 1 on the week, Cooper Kupp. Absolute smash spot for Cooper Kupp this week. Number 1 wide receiver for me on the week. Number 1 in adjusted fantasy points allowed are the Minnesota Vikings, who he plays this week. Unfortunately for me, who I have to play against Cooper Kupp in my home league, I think he's just going to go bonkers this week. Just one game with less than 10 targets this season, and he had 9 in that game. One game with less than 16 PPR points on the entire season. This has been the model of consistency for the wide receiver position for fantasy in general. When we say that we want our wide receivers to be consistent, this is usually how it goes. We usually have one guy every year, maybe 2 guys, 3 guys every year that do what Cooper Kupp is doing. Last year was Diggs and Adams. This year it is Cooper Kupp and pretty much nobody else at this point in time. So he is my number 1 wide receiver on the week. He has Mackenzie Alexander in the slot against the Minnesota Vikings, who's allowed a 70% catch percentage, and he has nearly a 50-point PFF grade advantage over what Mackenzie Alexander has posted this year. So again, absolute smash spot for Cooper Kupp. If you guys are playing DFS, he's going to be highly owned, but I honestly think he's worth paying up for on DraftKings this week. So number 2, Davante Adams, who I have on my team that I have to play against Cooper Kupp. He is also in a pretty good spot to perform as well, because the Browns, while they've been a good defense against fantasy wide receivers in general, they are down multiple pieces in the secondary due to COVID and injuries, with Denzel Ward, John Johnson, Greg Newsome recently put on the COVID list and also dealing with injuries. Davante Adams is expected to see Greedy Williams in coverage, which is good for a 91.3 matchup advantage according to PFF. As you guys can see, if you're interested in starting Allen Lazard, who's also a viable flex option in this game, he's also up there with a pretty decent matchup against MJ Stewart as well. Number 3, as of now, I'm going to assume that Tyreek Hill is going to play. Now, that is all up in the air as it currently stands right now, because he did test positive for COVID-19 on Monday. If he's vaccinated, which I haven't seen really any reports saying that he is, but it did say that Travis Kelce is vaccinated. So the new rules indicate that if he is vaccinated, he only needs 1 negative test before Sunday's game in order to play. If he does play, he gets the Steelers defense that was torched by Justin Jefferson 2 weeks ago. Could have even had a bigger game than he did. And T. Higgins and Keenan Allen both went over 100 yards in the past month against the Steelers defense. He'll draw Arthur Mollett in coverage if he does end up playing. But again, something to monitor with the Kansas City Chiefs is that Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce both in danger of missing this game. Number 4, Deebo Samuel, who plays tonight. He's kind of been a victim of circumstance the past 5 games, because without Elijah Mitchell in the lineup consistently, he hasn't seen more than 5 targets and has instead been supplemented 5 or more carries in every game. So yes, we love that Deebo Samuel gets involved in the rushing game, but we want to see him get the targets as well. And that's not happened, especially for those of us who play in PPR leagues. Those targets are much more valuable than what the carries can present. With no Elijah Mitchell again for this game, he has already been ruled out. You got to figure this hybrid role for Deebo Samuel is in store for this week and probably here to stay for the rest of the season. So Deebo Samuel, as you guys can see, when he's out at wide receiver, is going to see Chris Jones in coverage. Brandon Ayuk on Christian Fulton. Christian Fulton's been pretty good this year, but not quite as good as what AJ Terrell was, who Brandon Ayuk was on the majority of last week's game. Number 5 is Keenan Allen. Since week 8, Keenan Allen has had one game with less than 10 targets, and he had 8 targets in that game. I'm smelling a Justin Herbert blow-up week. We've seen when Justin Herbert is on, he is really on. He has finished as a top 3 quarterback more than any other QB in the NFL. We've seen his blow-ups also come against bad teams like the New York Giants a couple of weeks ago, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cincinnati Bengals this season. When he blows up, he usually blows up against teams that don't have the greatest record. Obviously, against the Houston Texans, they are in line for a top 5 pick this year. And Keenan Allen should have an awesome matchup advantage over Desmond King, who's allowed a 70% catch percentage, 1.44 yards per route covered. And also you can see Mike Williams' matchup against Lonnie Johnson Jr. there is also very good. Number 6, Justin Jefferson. He could be the recipient of the Jalen Ramsey treatment this week, which knocks him down a bit for me. Wide receiver 6 for me on the week. He would probably be my wide receiver 2 or 3 if he wasn't getting Jalen Ramsey this week, but still an elite option nonetheless. We heard the Vikings offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, come out in week 9 and talk about how Justin Jefferson wasn't getting involved enough after 2 5-target games. And since that point, Justin Jefferson has had 0 games with less than 9 targets. So he definitely meant what he said. Justin Jefferson is heavily involved in the game plan. I expect that to be the case. Even despite seeing a good helping of Jalen Ramsey in this game, I am starting him with absolutely no concerns. Wide receiver 7 for me on the week is Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson had an irritating 5 for 38 stat line last week. So if you guys are still in the playoffs after his stat line, maybe you managed to survive last round despite that performance, or maybe you had a bye and Deontay Johnson is on your team. He only has 3 games this entire season where he didn't have double-digit targets. One of them came last week. One of them came back in week 4, week 5 against Denver, where he caught a long touchdown. And then he had one other game like that as well. But every other game, this is a guy that you can book in for 10 plus targets. And it's just my luck that I happened to play him in DFS last week when he didn't have 10 plus targets. But you got to figure Pittsburgh's probably going to fall behind against Kansas City this week. Should be a positive game script for the passing game. Should mean a lot of targets for Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is expected to see split time between Mike Hughes, who's been pretty good this year, but also DeAndre Baker, who hasn't been very good this year. On the outside, he should be in for a pretty solid game. And then Chase Claypool and Ray McLeod, you guys can see their matchups there as well. Number 8, closing out the top 8 wide receivers, is Antonio Brown, which obviously saw a huge uptick from what I talked about last week. I talked about Antonio Brown as a guy that I'm not trusting heading into the playoffs, but obviously with the Chris Godwin ACL tear, Mike Evans dealing with a hamstring injury, he did not practice yesterday. Should be a big spot for Antonio Brown. We still have Evans having a chance to play, and knowing Mike Evans as well as I do, because I'm a fan of this team, I have a feeling that he's probably going to try and play because he's a really tough receiver. He doesn't tend to miss a lot of games for nagging injuries. Even if it's a hamstring injury, he'll probably just be out there as a decoy or whatever the case is. So interesting to see how, if Mike Evans plays, the Panthers deploy Stephon Gilmore, because traditionally we've seen shadow corners gravitate towards Mike Evans, but with Mike Evans hobbled, Antonio Brown being as good as Antonio Brown has been when he's been on the field this year, maybe they elect to put Stephon Gilmore in shadow coverage on Antonio Brown, whether Mike Evans plays or not. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see. But regardless, this is a great offense. Antonio Brown and Tom Brady have a great connection. Antonio Brown has been, bar none, one of the most efficient receivers this year on a per target basis. So Antonio Brown is in my lineup as a top 10 wide receiver. If you guys have him coming off of suspension, thank your lucky stars that Chris Godwin tore his ACL, because he is going to win a lot of people some leagues this year, in my opinion. Now, wide receivers 9 to 16. I'll get into this range. Jamar Chase, first guy off the list, wide receiver 9 for me this week. One of the biggest duds we've seen out of Chase last week. 1 catch for 3 yards. I don't know how the hell that happens out of a guy as talented as Jamar Chase, but hopefully you guys were on bye and you skipped that horrid performance in a slow-paced game against the Denver Broncos. Jamar Chase lambasted the Baltimore Ravens last time he played them for 200 yards and a touchdown back in week 7. Now, that was with Marlon Humphrey in coverage on him, in primary coverage on him. So the fact that Marlon Humphrey is now out for the rest of the season and a couple other pieces in that secondary out as well, I really love Jamar Chase's outlook. He's facing Kevin Seymour in coverage this week, who has a 44.5 PFF grade, huge advantage for Jamar Chase, 75% catch percentage allowed, 92.0 matchup advantage for Jamar Chase. He is in for a monster week. I really love the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins stack this week in DFS, if you guys are going to be playing DFS this week. Number 10, Closing out the top 10 is Stephon Diggs. He has the dreaded J.C. Jackson matchup this week, who J.C. Jackson's been pretty much a lockdown corner all season at New England. The last time that they played the Patriots, obviously Diggs didn't have the greatest game, but it was, a very bad weather game in Buffalo. So that could be part of the reason why he didn't have a great game. But regardless, you still have to start Stephon Diggs, even despite the Bills being on the road. I have him at 10 this week, where I would normally have him inside that top 6 range. If you guys are curious, Gabriel Davis is expected to see Miles Bryant mostly in the slot. Cole Beasley could be out, or will be out for this game because he's unvaccinated. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that Cole Beasley is unvaccinated and he tested positive for COVID. Emmanuel Sanders not expected to play either. So it should just be the Stephon Diggs show at wide receiver, with Gabriel Davis and Isaiah McKenzie kind of mixing in here and there. Number 11 is CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has had 9+ targets in 3 straight games, but it's also really been since week 6 that we've seen this Cowboys offense have an explosive performance. In week 10, they had a game against the Atlanta Falcons, but that was likely due to defensive turnovers. And we also saw Zeke Elliott get a big performance in that one as well. We haven't seen this passing game be very, very explosive since the beginning of the season. That definitely lowers the floor and ceiling of a guy like CeeDee Lamb on a weekly basis, and also Amari Cooper, who we've seen struggle this year. But CeeDee Lamb is still a guy I'm throwing into my lineup. He's expected to see Danny Johnson in coverage, which is a pretty solid matchup for him. 68% catch percentage allowed. Number 12 is AJ Brown. Now, I'm willing to bet at the time you guys are listening to this, we'll probably have heard whether or not AJ Brown is getting activated or he's not getting activated off of the injured reserve. He's already been technically activated to open his practice window, but they haven't officially said AJ Brown is either playing or not playing in tonight's game against San Francisco. But if AJ Brown plays, he had 9 or more targets in 5 of his last 6 games before suffering the chest injury. Lattimore in shadow coverage was the only bad game that he had. He had 4 targets and 1 catch in that game. AJ Brown would be in place of Nick Westbrook-Akeen in the matchup chart that you guys can see on the screen. And for reference, Ambry Thomas, who would be his primary matchup, has allowed a 2.78 yards per route covered. And basically that is the cornerback version of the yards per route run stat. And 2.78 yards per route covered basically means that Ambry Thomas is making every receiver that goes up against him look like Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel, who currently lead the league in yards per route run, along with Antonio Brown. So that is how bad this corner has been. And if AJ Brown is on the field, I expect him to have a monster game in this one, because as I've kind of talked about for a couple of weeks, the 49ers are undermanned in the secondary severely right now. So if AJ Brown plays, could be a huge game for him. Also, Julio Jones is expected to play as well somehow. So he could be a guy that you throw into your flex spot. Wide receiver 13 is Jalen Waddle. He has the awesome benefit of being a slot receiver for the Miami Dolphins. So he will avoid the Marshawn Lattimore treatment. He will not get shadow coverage from Marshawn Lattimore in this game. The Saints' other corners are absolutely exploitable and beatable by a guy like Jalen Waddle. I mean, we saw what Chris Godwin was doing before he was taken out of the game with a dirty ACL tear hit by Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He was working the guy. So it doesn't shock me that Godwin was about to have a big game in that game last week. Jalen Waddle should be, as a slot receiver, in line for a big game this week. Number 14, similar to Jamar Chase, obviously T. Higgins had 15 targets against the Baltimore Ravens back in week 7. This game is now at home as well. T. Higgins expected to see Anthony Averett, who's been pretty solid in coverage at taking, the ball away and limiting some catches, but he has been one of the highest targeted corners in the NFL. So at the very least, and we've already kind of seen this, T. Higgins should be in for like a 10+ target game, if I had to guess. Number 15, we have Tyler Lockett. Before being out with COVID-19, Tyler Lockett had at least 95 yards or a touchdown in 4 straight games before being ruled out on Tuesday. Tyler Lockett would take in the spot of Freddie Swain in this matchup chart against Christian in coverage, who again has allowed a very high yards per route covered and a 73% catch percentage. If I had to pick a Seahawks wide receiver, if Tyler Lockett is back, I would pick Tyler Lockett. Number 16, not a good performance last week from Hunter Renfrow, but Darren Waller still might be out. So I'm willing to throw Hunter Renfrow into my lineup. We don't have Darren Waller practicing yet. We have no idea what the return timetable is for him. So as long as Darren Waller is out, I still view Hunter Renfrow as a mid wide receiver 2. And even if Darren Waller is back, I think he's a low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 that you can absolutely throw into your lineup. Now, before we get into wide receivers 17 to 24 and the remaining part of the list, we have to pay some bills around here. Thank you to our sponsors over at Manscaped. And you guys will be hearing that message right now.
Hey lads, this FSC video is brought to you by the global leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming, Manscaped. This holiday season, equip yourself or a loved one with the premier men's groom product available on the market. Manscaped is the ultimate gift, and they're here to change the men's grooming game for good. Don't go into 2022 without the premier men's hygiene product available on the market, including the Performance Package 4.0, which will be sure to leave the men in your life excited for this new year. This hygiene bundle includes the Lawnmower 4.0, Weed Whacker, Boxers, Travel Kit, and liquid formulations. The new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer is waterproof with advanced skin-safe technology to reduce against nicks and cuts, something your Jingle Balls will most definitely appreciate this holiday season. The Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer can help you whack those gross, unwanted hairs in your ears and nose, and this product also has the proprietary skin-safe technology to help prevent against nicks, snags, and tugs. The Performance Package also includes Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant to protect against chafing, as well as their Crop Reviver Ball Toner, which will keep your boys fresh at all times. On top of everything, they've even thrown in the Shed Travel Bag to carry your goods and the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxer Briefs to hold the entire package together. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BUSH at Manscaped. Promo code BUSH will get you, as I said, 20% off plus free shipping, but we're not done with the great news this holiday season. Check manscaped.com for applicable deals throughout the holiday season, such as this deal on the Performance Package 4.0, and remember to use code BUSH at checkout for the added discount of 20% off and free shipping. Whether you're gifting for your brother, your dad, your significant other, they'll all thank you for the crisp delivery and attention to detail that Manscaped has shown in their products. Again, we appreciate the support for the Fantasy Stock Exchange by our friends over at Manscaped, the leaders in male grooming. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped for their shower time routine by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code BUSH. That's 20% off plus free shipping. It's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com with promo code BUSH. Clean those ornaments and make sure your tree is desirable this Christmas.
All right, so big thanks to Manscaped. Again, if you guys haven't already done so, check out their website. They have a bunch of holiday deals going on. Maybe you're not getting a Christmas gift for anybody else, a little too late by this point in time, but maybe you get some money for Christmas or whatever, and you want to, spend it on yourself and do something good for yourself and also for your significant other as well. You can check out our sponsors, manscaped.com. Using promo code BUSH, you'll get 20% off plus free shipping site-wide. Number 17 is Marquise Brown. We have Marquise Brown going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, and Marquise Brown really is a guy that is the poster child for positive regression. Now, I don't usually like using that term, but in this offense, he is getting very, very good volume. He only had 43 yards last week, but he caught 10 passes and had 14 targets. And not only that, but he hasn't had less than 7 targets since week 6. And he had double-digit targets in 5 of 7 games since that point. So this is a dude that is getting the volume. He just hasn't connected on the big plays, hasn't scored many touchdowns during that stretch. So Marquise Brown, again, we don't know 100% if Lamar Jackson's going to be on the field, but even with Tyler Huntley, I still do like Marquise Brown this week as a guy that is getting very, very good volume in a good matchup against Eli Apple. Number 18 is Odell Beckham Jr. Now, I have Odell Beckham Jr. well above where ECR has him. I tend to think this Rams offense just goes berserk this week against the Vikings because the matchups are just so great across the board for all the wide receivers. Odell Beckham Jr. has 3 touchdowns since joining the Rams team. And he had 0 before that with the Cleveland Browns. This game has the highest over-under of any game on the slate at 49.5. So I really like Odell Beckham Jr. and Van Jefferson this week as top 36 options against Patrick Peterson in coverage. I don't think Odell Beckham Jr. should have too many problems there. Number 19, we have Brandon Cooks. Now, again, similar to Tyler Lockett, we don't 100% know if Brandon Cooks is going to play this week. He is currently on the COVID list, and it would be, not a surprise, but it would be a long shot for him to play given he was put on the COVID list on Tuesday. 2 straight games, though, of 100 yards for Brandon Cooks before he went out with Davis Mills as the quarterback. I'm still going to treat it like he has a chance of playing because I don't know his vaccination status. And if he is vaccinated, it makes it pretty easy for him to get back on the field. If he can go, he should see a lot of Michael Davis in coverage. Number 20, we have DK Metcalf, the other Seahawks wide receiver. He again fails to produce in the game that we just saw him in, but his usage, yet again, was very good. 12 targets, 6 for 52 to show for it. This is what we were worried about coming into the season, though. The reason I wasn't very high on the Seahawks offense, when the efficiency disappears, which it has for Russell Wilson and the Seahawks players, you're going to be pissed with Russ in the Seahawks offense because the volume has never been there over the course of Russ's really entire career because since Pete Carroll has been there. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing with the inconsistency with DK Metcalf and also Tyler Lockett at times during this year. DK Metcalf is expected to see Kendall Vildor in coverage, which is a very good matchup for him. So again, I have confidence of throwing him out this week, but I don't think he is a must play necessarily with the state of this offense. Number 21, we have Terry McLaurin, who literally burnt Darius Slay and was underthrown for a long touchdown last week. But such is life for Terry McLaurin. He has had terrible quarterback play his entire career so far. Should see a frequent amount of Trayvon Diggs this week, who held him to 0 catches before his concussion 2 weeks ago. He dropped the donut in a lot of people's lineups. So Terry McLaurin, if you guys do have him, is in danger of having a floor game this week against a very good Cowboys defense. But at the same time, he is still a guy that I'm starting as a top 24 wide receiver because he has very, very high ceiling game potential. And also he should have his quarterbacks back this week. I believe as of today, Taylor Heineke has been taken off of the COVID list. So that gives him a little bit more of a higher floor and a higher ceiling as a result. Number 22, we have Mike Williams. Similar to what I said for Keenan Allen, this game pops as a blow-up spot for the Chargers offense based on what they've done so far this season. And we've seen when Justin Herbert blows up, we can definitely see Mike Williams blow up as a result of that. We know what Mike Williams' role is at this point. It's not what we saw at the beginning of the year. He's going to be a little bit more inconsistent, but we saw even as soon as last week on Thursday night against Kansas City, this guy gets opportunities and he gets high value opportunities. He had 2 end zone targets last week that he couldn't cash in on. And in this game, if they're going to score a lot of points, I really trust Mike Williams to put up a signature Mike Williams ceiling game. As you guys can see, and as I already kind of talked about, Lonnie Johnson Jr. is his primary matchup, who has a 28.7 PFF grade this season, which is one of the worst among all starting corners in the NFL. Number 23, we have Michael Pittman Jr., who's been pretty solid this year from a consistency standpoint and a target standpoint, but has had some rough weeks and tough matchups in recent games. He got ejected from Saturday night's game last week, but he actually has a decent matchup in this game relative to what he's been playing in recent weeks. People will quickly forget how capable Michael Pittman Jr. has been of double-digit target performances and thus having a lot of ceiling potential from that perspective. Byron Murphy and Marco Wilson is what he is expected to see in coverage. Split time against those two guys. Probably do most of his damage against Marco Wilson, which has been the case for many wide receivers going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, finally, closing out the top 24, speaking of the Arizona Cardinals, we have Christian Kirk, who had a monster game last week with DeAndre Hopkins out, despite the brutal game that the Cardinals offense had really as a whole, scoring the ball against the Detroit Lions. I am firing up Christian Kirk again this week. Going up against the Indianapolis Colts is not as easy on paper as the Lions matchup was, but I like the target share. I like what I saw out of Christian Kirk, and I'm willing to trust him this week. Now, again, that was my top 24. If you guys want access to the deeper portion of my rankings, or you want to see my tight ends, my quarterbacks, running backs, etc., we just had a big news drop today about Dalvin Cook being placed on the COVID list. So obviously that shook up my running back rankings a little bit, as well as Joe Mixon practicing yesterday. So if you want to see an updated version of that, you can just check out the rankings in the link in the description. Adam Thielen is my wide receiver 25, though. He is going up against the Los Angeles Rams if he plays. Again, we don't know 100% if he's going to play in this one, but PFF does have him in the matchup chart, which means they kind of expect him to play. So I'm just going to treat it as such right now. Number 26, Cordell Patterson, I talked about yesterday as a running back. Number 27, we have Amari Cooper going up against the Washington football team, who on paper are a good matchup, but we've seen Amari Cooper kind of disappear in games before. So I can't rank him really any higher than this, but he does have a very, very high ceiling in the offense and the quarterback that he plays with going up against this matchup. We could see a big time Amari Cooper smash game. Number 28 is Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney's 5 for 63. Doesn't look very flashy from what he had last week, but he nearly had 2 touchdowns. He had 2 end zone targets that he could have come down with, and that would have resulted in a big game for him. So he's a guy that I'm willing to start a little bit higher than where consensus has him. He has Ugo Amadi primarily in coverage, who is allowing an 81% catch percentage, and just had Cooper Kupp go absolutely hog wild on him. Number 29, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who really has been very good lately. Double-digit targets in 3 straight games, although they might have DeAndre Swift back this week, who is the leading receiver for the Detroit Lions on the season. So good matchup against Richie Grant, too. 84% catch percentage allowed is probably one of the worst in the entire league at the cornerback position. So Amon-Ra St. Brown could be in line for another big target game in this one. Number 30, Van Jefferson, I already kind of touched on. I just like the Rams offense in general this week. Number 31, Brandon Ayuk had a really tough matchup last week against AJ Terrell, who's playing like a borderline all-pro corner this year. Should be an easier matchup this week against Christian Fulton, but still not a smash spot for him. Russell Gage to close out the top 32 is somehow relevant in fantasy at this point in the year and has a favorable matchup, which Christian Kirk just took advantage of against AJ Parker in the slot against the Detroit Lions. So that is the top 32 wide receivers for the week. If you guys did enjoy this video, as always, please hit the like button. It takes you 2 seconds, really helps us out, really helps us grow. Comment any of your thoughts down below as well. Any start sit questions you have, I will answer. Subscribe to the channel if you are new also. And make sure if you want to become a member, hit that join button. You can support us for, $3.50 American, $5 Canadian a month. And that'll get you some cool access to priority comments and badges and emojis, members only polls. We'll eventually be doing members only live streams, all that fun stuff by becoming a member. So appreciate it. Peace out. And I'll talk to you soon.